My name is Max Bamfield. Welcome to my talk. Today I'm going to explain to you how I invented the standing computer desk, why it took so long, and why tens of thousands of people want you to believe that they did the research and inventing. In fact, they didn't. I did 100% of the research and inventing. And they've been so convincing that you probably think they did it. The problem was, I had health problems in 1975. My doctors couldn't see anything on an x-ray. Other people said that the only thing that office workers do is sit at a desk and listen to biro, which is light. Impossible to have a physical cause. So millions of research papers and books were written on the psychological cause of pain. And of course the medications didn't help. So I started doing research myself to find the real cause. Between 1975 and 1980, I explain how I wrote that posture theory, and I explain how I wrote the books and concluded that the standing desk was the solution, and then I'll go through each book. When I started research, I had no idea what was the cause of these problems, but occasionally I notice leaning forward to that desk and I get kidney aches or abdominal pains, or leaning forward to tying up my shoelaces would cause pain. Leaning towards a bench, I'd feel faint or dizzy. And if it happened every time, it'd be obvious. Somebody else would have thought of this 500 years ago, but it wasn't obvious. But I came to the conclusion that it may be the cause, so I kept taking notes and writing essays on how this might happen. And after 5 years, I said, poor posture is definitely the cause. And I wrote an essay, and I basically said in that essay, poor posture compresses the chest to cause chest pain, the lungs cause breathing problems, the kidneys to cause kidney aches, the abdomen to cause abdominal pains, it strains the neck and the back to cause neck ache, backaches and headaches. And that's what this essay is all about. I also knew that I'd proven 100 years of psychiatric theory was wrong. So, to avoid offending psychiatrists, I added information about the possible involvement of stress. And then one day I heard somebody say, see, I told you so, it's a mental problem. So I haven't mentioned anything about psychological facts, so it simply isn't necessary. But those ideas have been used against me. And that's the desk I'm standing in front of. And the first thing I'm going to do is go through this book and show you where the diagrams come from. This is the posture theory, 11th edition. And that's the first illustration, which is the conclusion of 23 years of research. Now that's a scribbled out diagram, and it's not the same appearance of my desk, but it's the same position there, and that's what everybody copies. Because if they don't, they just have the same old standing desks that were rare because nobody wanted them years ago. Now this diagram gives you an indication that sitting at a desk is the cause of these range of health problems. And that was 1980. It took 5 years to figure that out. And then I was standing at tall benches. And that's a scribbled out diagram. I was still in pain. Didn't help much. But I kept the desk that height. And then I put an angled platform on it, which you can see there. And they didn't help either. And that's why nobody else solved this problem. Nothing really helped. And they'd say, oh, standing at a desk gives you sore legs and sore back and all sorts of things, and it wasn't worth it. That's why furniture companies couldn't sell them. And then, of course, there's a final diagram, the one that I'm still using today, standing in front of a computer. You can see the actual photo is very similar to that in 1998. It might have been taken a year later. That's the one that everyone in the world now copies. And if they don't copy that, they put a height adjustable mechanism on it. There's 10,000 companies put height adjustable mechanisms on that design and want you to believe they invented it. You take away my design and the height adjustable mechanism, it's just a wind-up mechanism from a Hills hoist clothesline or from a Meccano set for children. There's all sorts of elaborate wind-up mechanisms. But if you take away my design on top, it's useless. And that's why some companies make standing desktops. They just do the top bit and add it onto an ordinary desk. That's also an obvious copy of my design. So, this book, which you can see here, was written under copyright every year I wrote it. I wrote 11 editions because I knew people would want to steal it to make a lot of money. And I wanted to make sure it was in every library so that they couldn't say they did it first. It's not in libraries now. Somebody's removed every one of my 800 books from libraries. And I've been banned from everywhere I go by the people who want you to think they did the inventing. This is the diagram on one of the early pages of my book. And this was drawn by an artist in Tea Tree Plaza Shopping Centre. One day I was walking through and I saw this guy drawing sketches of people's faces. And I thought, that's brilliant. Can you draw my diagram professionally for $5 like everyone else? He said, yes. So he did it. And 3 days later he said, that'll be $25. I said, I can't afford it, I don't want it. So he gave it to me for $5. And it's a very neat diagram and I've been using it ever since. I'd gladly give him his $25 now, but I don't know the guy anymore. So, that's where that diagram came from. Now, this diagram is in the book, and this is on page 109. And it's my final conclusion, which I also drew on the front page. The first illustration. This is a diagram I drew. I drew lots of diagrams on posture. And then I'd draw or write a paragraph or two on how white causes health problems. And every week that went by, as I'm reading books, I'd find something and a paragraph. So in the first books, I'd write something about back pain, and as I found more information, I'd add a paragraph to it. So you'll see here how there's lots of different things about posture there. Well, I didn't write the book and at the end keep writing. I wrote the book, and where there's something on back pain, I go back and add an extra sentence on back pain. If I wrote about chest pains, I go back and put something in about that. So this book got bigger and bigger. That's a diagram from the 19th century, so it's out of copyright. Now, it's not about humans, and this is what it says. It's the diagram reference Anthropology, an introduction to the study of man and civilization, 1881. So it's out of copyright. Previously from Man's Place in Nature, 1863, where the gibbon was represented as being twice normal size. The original diagram was drawn by Mr. Waterhouse Hawkins from specimens of known in the Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons. So he drew diagrams to attempt to show how people and animals had different postures, and humans have evolved the upright posture. So you can see my diagram behind me of osteitis to draw them slouching and gradually getting taller and taller and upright. This is page 278, and that's when I started standing or adding an angled platform to my desk to see if that would help. And it didn't, but I kept using it for probably a year. So that's one book. Now, it started off as this book, which is a Posture Theory first edition. I wrote the essay on poor posture causing health problems in 1980, and I published this book in 1994, after I was diagnosed with cancer and given 2 months to live. The reason I was given 2 months to live was because a surgeon said I had a cancerous lump in my neck and cancers in my chest and my abdomen and in my blood and my bone marrow. He said if I only have one lump in my neck, a good chance of survival, maybe 90% chance of survival. But I was riddled with cancer. He said, no hope of cure. I'll be dead in 2 months. So I started writing this book and selling it to school libraries so that parents and teachers would know that poor posture can make you sick, so the kids could grow up straight. Now, I didn't sell many of them. They were only $2 each. But later in the year, I added some more information to the book, and I published this one, the second edition, and there's a few illustrations in it that are still in the modern one because I haven't taken anything out. I've just added information as I went along. That's something about poor posture being caused by the way a person sits and stands. Now, psychologists were saying at the time poor posture is caused by depression. And they don't like me saying it's caused by the way you sit and stand and nutrition. But you can see there, if you get a tree and you stake it down in a bent position with a rope and leave it there for a while, it'll grow that way, and so do kids. The cause of poor posture is physical, not mental. It's pretty obvious, but a lot of people don't want you to know that. So those are the, there's a couple of illustrations of posture in there. Now this one is the 4th edition. I'll just see if I can find out when I did that. Revised in March 1995. And that's when I started standing at a desk. And I scribbled out that diagram. It's based on something written a few hundred years ago, so it's out of copyright. But because I don't steal copyright, everyone else steals my copyright. But that's, my copyright lasts till 70 years after I'm dead. These guys did their diagrams hundreds of years ago. There's an illustration of poor posture in this book to show various effects. That's a diagram of a man who had rickets, and that's not caused by depression either, it's caused by vitamin deficiency, vitamin D deficiency. There are some diagrams on posture. There's another illustration. These are illustrations from old books about posture, but I couldn't figure out how it was causing health problems. Psychologists were still writing psychological causes. This is also another illustration about posture, different postures when you sit, stand and move. because I knew there was something going wrong somewhere relating to it. As I did these diagrams, I'd sell the 100 books to schools throughout South Australia initially, and then interstate, and then some overseas. And these books were stapled together by a company in Adelaide, which was the first company in South Australia to use computers to make books. It had a computer about 20 feet long, and they'd put my computer disk in a machine in one room, press a button, and 100 books would come out, a 20-foot long computer conveyor belt at the end, then they staple it. This book was glued together by glue at the spine rather than staples. Well, it's got staples at the end, and that's glued. When I was selling them to schools in the country towns, I'd drive the car along with the books on the back shelf of the car, and the sun would melt the glue in the spines, and some of the books fell apart. So I had to stop putting the books in the back shelf to look after them. This one is the 5th edition, and it's the first one, which is hardback. By then I couldn't afford to pay the typist or the computer guys to do all this, so I had to get a computer and start learning to type and compute myself. But this is a hardback. It was more expensive to make, so I think I sold these for $25 each to schools. And each year I'd go back to the same schools and the same libraries, or others, or new ones in different states, and they'd order a second copy or a third or fourth. They'd say, oh, it's very interesting and useful, we'll get another one. So anyone who says they weren't useful and they weren't popular, they were with various people. There's the same illustration standing at a desk, and this was published in 1996 February, so I sold it within the years after that, and I'll just go through it. You can see the same illustrations. The book's just getting bigger and bigger as I found more and more information on posture and health. Nobody had ever tied this together before, which is really surprising, but they just didn't. Even people who had ideas about posture didn't study it in any scientific way. That's a picture in a book, a medical book by a brilliant doctor, brilliant heart specialist. That's the posture of people that get all these health problems that I had. And he mentioned that, and then he said that it's a mental disorder. And every doctor made the same wrong assumption. They noticed the posture, but they didn't focus anything on it. And they certainly didn't invent any way of curing it with posture. So I'll just sketch you that one. Another picture of poor posture. I'll move on to the next book. This is the 6th edition. And you can see the same desk. It's not what mine looked like, but I was standing at a desk, like I'm standing at a desk now. But my desk is complicated. This is just a simple table, which all the furniture companies used to make. And wonder why nobody bought them. They made them wind up, and that's all they did. There's all the copyright. Every year I wrote it, I said copyright. People are going to steal this idea. I need protection by copyright law, because everyone was ridiculing me. There's some diagrams of posture. In my day, people would go to school carrying kit bags and satchels. And I said that's the cause of sideways curvature of the spine. Part of my problem, everyone said, no, it's not sideways curvature of the spine, psychological cause. And I said, it isn't. Well, now, every school, practically every student carries their books to school in a knapsack. Right, when I was young, before I wrote this book, practically every kid in the school carried their books to school for half a mile in a kit bag. So people have realised I'm correct and they've changed, but they're not telling you it's because of me. Lots of people are stealing from it. I don't want to accuse any individual, but lots of people have, you know, you get any 1,000 people and probably 50 of them are crooks of some sort and they'll steal anything. I added diagrams as I found them because I couldn't sit down and write the book again. It would cripple me. So I only added paragraphs at a time, maybe a sentence or a paragraph a day. People steal from me in a couple of hours. So there's some more, just to give you a general idea. Many people observed that these things were bad posture is bad for you, but they weren't studying any detail. That's why they couldn't work out what to do about it. And they go back to saying, oh, it's all psychological. So all people with poor posture were seen to psychiatrists. This is the 7th edition. M.A. Banfield. I wrote under the name of M.A. Banfield to avoid the stigma of mental illness. That's why nobody else, a patient, wrote about they were ashamed of themselves because they were branded as mental cases. And everyone thought that was someone they didn't know. I'm Max Banfield. I didn't put Max Banfield on there because everyone knows me as Max. I just put M.A. Banfield and people thought the author was a woman, especially when I sent it to Nurses Journal. So I never had to put up with the stigma that other people had to put up with. Alexander Pope had poor posture and a lot of health problems, including kidney disease, so I wrote about him. There's some more comments on posture. The whole book is about posture in the stomach, posture in the kidneys, posture and everything. There's some more illustrations about posture, sideways curvature of the spine, forward curvature of the spine. Again, a lot of people wrote about posture, but they couldn't figure out how it was making people sick. And they didn't invent anything to any way of doing anything about it. Just standing at the desk was pretty much a waste of time. And that's why the psychological theory continued. This is the 8th edition. This book was probably selling for $30 a book. And you can see there I'm still standing at the desk. I didn't invent this real quick. Nobody else, everyone else hadn't done it for 2,000 years. So they want you to believe it's just common sense. They could have done it themselves in 5 minutes. That's ridiculous. But there, I continue with the copyright. Because I knew people would try and steal the credit for this idea and all the financial benefits. There's a lot of pages in there, a lot on posture. Every chapter is basically about posture and health. And this book, I started doing an index so that people could check the facts. These are the references. They eventually ended up with 300 references, books going back to Hippocrates, and to try and figure out why and how poor posture was causing problems, because none of these people knew how or why, or even wrote about it. So there's those references going back to Hippocrates, if you have a look there. What I want to show you is this is page 521. So the book was getting bigger and bigger. It's 520, more than that in that book. Now this one is the 9th edition of the book. It's the 9th edition. Just put it on the ladder. Make things easier for me to show you these books. These books were written over a period of 6 years, from the time I had cancer in 1994 to the time I had a stem cell transplant in the year 2000. And you see, I'm still standing at a flat top desk and still having problems with a lot of pain. There's an illustration of sideways curvature of the spine. There's some posture diagrams. You've possibly seen them in previous books. Different things affect people's posture, clothing styles and so forth. That's how corsets, the shape of the corset permanently deforms a person's spine in different ways. So when psychologists were saying depression and anxiety cause poor posture, that's definitely not the case. It's physical factors and nutrition that affects the bones, that affects posture. This is how you can change the shape of the head over the years by applying various hats and devices to the heads. So you can change the shape of the body, and it's physical methods that do it. Now this is page 654, if you can see that. Now this is the 10th edition. A lot of these books, the front cover was standing at a desk, but I had angled platforms in some of them, and I had various other diagrams in there. This is the 10th edition. It's the first one where I was free of pain, and that's the position I was in. Now, my desk doesn't look like that. It's not flat-topped. I've shown you pictures of my desk. It's got all sorts of different levels. And all sorts of different positions that what everyone copies, because that's what solves the problem. And that's why I did this diagram, to show sitting, standing, an angle platform, and then the standing desk design. And all the other designs were in between. So I tried sitting. I used to sit like this, so I tried sitting up straight, tried leaning back, I tried standing up straight, tried all sorts of things. And some of the diagrams you can see behind me, but these are changes in the cover diagrams, in the front page diagrams. I'll see if I can. Some of these you've seen before. I just kept adding more. Did you see that one? You've probably seen that one before. That's a picture of the spine I got from old books. Howard Hughes had a very bad posture. He was always in pain. He's the billionaire. There's a lot of text as well. A lot of other illustrations about how the anatomy is affected. I looked at posture and internal anatomy. That's the ancient scribes. That's the desk they used. The angled platform, useless. It would have helped them, but it was never going to help me. But I'll just show it to you. So there were attempts at making different shaped desks in the past. None of them ever worked. And when I invented mine and it worked, and people tested it out and found it worked, they started stealing it and saying they invented it. I make a lot of money out of it. And leaving me with nothing. The public, some people think, doesn't matter. But I don't publish anymore. And I know a lot more than the people who copy me. They don't know anything at all. If I haven't published it, they can't figure it out. This is Molière and his posture. Famous Frenchman. So, this book has 846 pages. That there. And that's it. The 10th edition. Now, I've shown you the 11th edition before. That's the 10th edition is when I invented that desk and didn't publish it until a year later. So I didn't tell anyone about it till a year later because I knew people would steal everything. Well, I've done it since. And the public thinks that they're clever people who did it. They were still writing psychological theories. at the time. I'm the only one who did this research, and when they figured out I was right, they started changing. They're trying to rewrite history. But that's the 10th edition, and the copyright symbols are there. And basically, I invented it. Here it says, revised in August 1999, which probably means I invented it in about probably October, November 1998. Ultimately, I had to sell this book for $65 because it was cost me that much for printing, binding, postage. But the library stopped buying it, the universities wouldn't buy it, and the newspapers wouldn't write about it. So I thought there's something wrong with the world. But now that it's obvious, everybody thinks it's obvious. 2,000 years ago, the ancient Romans didn't think of it. 100 years ago, they didn't think of it. They didn't think of it in the Industrial Revolution. They didn't think of it before me. All they had was tall desks which don't solve the problem. So, thank you for watching. What I want you to do is tell every furniture company and every person who claims they invented it, and every newspaper and every TV station, every newsreader, that I invented it, and tell the public. And don't let them get away with giving the false impression that furniture companies invented. They did too complicated. They don't know anything about health. Furniture companies didn't invent this desk. But they all now want you to believe they did. And I can understand that, but start paying me royalties and licence fees. And the universities and experts want you to believe they invented it and did the research. Well, they didn't. So that's how it happened. I want you to make it clear that you know me from this video. Make it clear to everyone that I did the research in inventing. And thank you for watching.